Vietnam, 1969. The rain over Laos fell in sheets, blurring the jungle into a single living wall of green. Captain Daniel Reeve of the U.S. Air Force had stopped thinking about the weather 3 hours ago. At 28,000 feet, inside the cockpit of his F-4C Phantom, the sky was clear and blue. Below him, North Vietnam waited. His mission was simple: photograph a newly discovered supply corridor west of Hanoi. In reality, nothing over North Vietnam was simple. The Phantom's radar officer, Lieutenant Mark Halverson, stared at his scope. Multiple returns, low altitude, MiGs. Reeve tightened his grip on the stick. Which type? Halverson hesitated. Small, fast, probably fish beds. MiG-21s. Reeve felt a cold knot in his stomach. They were ghosts. They appeared, fired, and vanished before American pilots even knew they had been targeted. ECM on, Reeve ordered. Static flooded their instruments as electronic countermeasures kicked in. Then something slammed into the Phantom's left side. The aircraft lurched violently. Warning lights exploded across the panel. "Hydraulics failing," Halverson shouted. "Engine 2 is losing pressure." Reeve fought the controls as the jet began rolling left. Where the hell did that come from? A MiG-21 had fired a heat-seeking missile from below and behind, using the jungle's thermal clutter to mask its approach. A perfect Soviet-designed ambush. "Eject! Eject!" Halverson yelled. Reeve shook his head. Not over Hanoi. He culled the Phantom into a shallow dive, bleeding speed and altitude, heading west, away from the heaviest air defenses. Below them, through the gaps in the clouds, he saw something unexpected. A narrow airstrip carved out of the jungle, camouflaged hangars, no American markings. A North Vietnamese forward base. The Phantom shuddered again. The left wing was on fire now. "Hold on," Reeve said quietly. The F-4C Phantom came in too fast, too heavy, trailing smoke. The landing gear barely locked. The jet slammed onto the runway, skidding sideways in a storm of sparks and torn concrete. Then, abruptly, it stopped. For one impossible second, there was silence. Then, soldiers came out of the jungle. Within minutes, Reeve and Halverson were on their knees, hands behind their heads, staring at the wreck of their aircraft. North Vietnamese troops swarmed it, already throwing camouflage nets over the smoking Phantom. Somewhere far above, American jets were still fighting, unaware that one of their most advanced reconnaissance aircraft had just fallen intact into enemy hands. 2 weeks later, Moscow. Major Yuri Antonov stared at the photograph on his desk. An American F-4C Phantom II, captured almost undamaged. The image had been taken by Soviet satellites, then confirmed by agents on the ground in Vietnam. The aircraft was already being dismantled under Soviet supervision. Antonov was not a politician. He was not even a general. He was a test pilot, one of the best the Soviet Union had. He had flown the MiG-17, MiG-19, MiG-21, and the brand-new MiG-23. He knew Soviet engineering intimately, rugged, efficient, designed for war in bad conditions by tired men on broken airfields. The Phantom was the opposite of everything he knew. Twin engines, two-man crew, radar, computers, guided missiles, reconnaissance cameras that could read license plates from the edge of space. A flying American philosophy. His orders were brief. You will go to Vietnam. You will fly the captured aircraft. You will tell us what it really is. 3 days later, Antonov was standing on a muddy airstrip outside Hanoi, staring at the Phantom under camouflage netting. Even damaged, it looked enormous. MiG-21s parked nearby looked like insects beside it. 8 days ago, this was killing our pilots. Now it is yours, a Vietnamese colonel said. Antonov walked slowly around it. The aircraft looked smooth, refined, almost elegant. Its airframe was flush riveted. Its wings were thick with fuel and electronics. It was not built to be cheap. It was built to be superior. Inside the cockpit, Antonov felt as if he had stepped into a different world. American labels, dozens of switches, digital displays mixed with analog gauges, a radar scope, camera controls, navigation computers. The MiG-21 cockpit was a knife. This was a control room. "How many men fly this?" Antonov asked. "2. "And how many maintain it?" The colonel smiled thinly. "We are still counting." The first engine start. The Phantom had been repaired just enough to fly. Soviet technicians had replaced damaged fuel lines with locally machined parts. Some American avionics had been bypassed, the rest were intact. Antonov climbed into the pilot's seat. A North Vietnamese interpreter sat behind him, next to a silent American prisoner, Captain Daniel Reeve. Reeve's face was pale, eyes hollow. "This thing will kill you," he said flatly. Antonov did not look at him. "Then tell me how not to die." Reeve hesitated. Then quietly, reluctantly, he began. The engines spooled up with a smoothness Antonov had never felt, not the violent roar of a MiG turbojet, but a controlled, steady power. The Phantom began to move. Antonov eased it onto the runway. "Don't yank her. She's heavy. Let the wings do the work." Antonov advanced the throttles. The F-4C surged forward. Then, slowly, it lifted. The jungle fell away. A Soviet pilot was flying an American jet over North Vietnam, and both sides of the Cold War held their breath.
The Phantom climbed like a heavily laden ship rising through fog. Unlike the MiG-21, which leapt toward the sky with violent urgency, the American jet rose steadily, calmly, as if it knew it had all the time in the world. Antonov held the climb, watching the instruments stabilize. The autopilot smoothed the turbulence before his hands even felt it. For the first time in his life, a combat aircraft was trying to fly itself. Below them, the scarred jungles of North Vietnam stretched endlessly. Bomb craters glimmered with rainwater. Roads snaked through burned villages. Antonov switched on the radar. The display bloomed into a precise map of terrain, rivers, buildings, and moving objects. He was seeing the war without ever looking out the window. "This isn't a fighter," Antonov said quietly. "It's a flying command center." Reeve gave a dry smile. "That's the idea." Antonov began testing the controls. Gentle turns felt smooth, almost luxurious. When he tried to snap the aircraft into a hard roll, the stability systems resisted him, softening the maneuver, protecting the airframe. The Phantom refused to be abused. It was designed to survive its own pilots. A MiG-21 would never do that. A MiG trusted the pilot completely and killed him if he was wrong. Antonov throttled back to simulate combat speed. The Phantom grew heavy, sluggish, reluctant to maneuver. It could fly, but it did not want to fight close. "In a dogfight," Antonov said quietly, "you would die." Reeve nodded. "So we don't dogfight. We shoot from far away." Antonov engaged the navigation and attack systems. The aircraft instantly plotted routes, targeting solutions, bomb trajectories that didn't even exist. It was a machine that assumed unlimited support: satellites, tankers, maintenance depots, technicians, spare parts. It assumed America was always there behind it. Soviet aircraft assumed nothing. After nearly an hour, Antonov turned back. Fuel consumption was immense. Every system drank from the tanks. The Phantom could do incredible things, but only if fed constantly by a global machine. The landing was delicate. The runway was barely long enough. Antonov brought the aircraft down carefully. When the wheels touched, the Phantom shuddered, then rolled to a stop. Silence. Reeve finally spoke. "So?" Antonov removed his helmet slowly. "You build a god, we build soldiers." That night, Antonov wrote his report by lantern light. He did not list technical details first, he wrote philosophy. The Phantom was powerful, brilliant, terrifying, and fragile. It was designed for a world where everything worked. The MiG was designed for a world where nothing did. America builds aircraft that need perfection. The Soviets build aircraft that survive imperfection. He ended with a sentence that would later circulate quietly through Soviet design bureaus. In war, the machine that forgives failure will always outlive the machine that demands excellence.
The report did not travel quickly. In the Soviet system, dangerous ideas never did. It moved through layers of officers, analysts, and designers, each reading it in silence. Antonov's words were unsettling, not because they praised American technology, but because they explained why it was seductive. The Phantom was not simply a jet, it was a promise that war could be turned into a technical problem, something that could be solved by electronics, computers, and precision. To men trained to think in terms of mass, endurance, and attrition, this was almost heretical. A month after his first flight, Antonov was ordered to fly the Phantom again, this time under more controlled conditions. North Vietnamese MiG-21 pilots were tasked to simulate intercepts. No live weapons were carried, but tracking pods and gun cameras recorded every second. The scenario was simple. The Phantom would fly a reconnaissance route. The MiGs would try to stop it. At altitude, the American aircraft was magnificent. Its radar saw everything. Antonov could track the MiGs long before they came close. He could predict their climb, their angle of approach, their interception point. In a clean, orderly sky, the Phantom was almost untouchable. But Vietnam was not a clean sky. The MiGs dove into cloud layers, hid against the ground clutter, then climbed sharply. They forced Antonov lower. The Phantom's systems struggled, radar returns blurred. The jet was suddenly blind. And then the MiGs were there, small, fast, silver needles. Antonov tried to turn, but the Phantom was heavy. Its wings were built for stability, not violence. In the first simulated engagement, the MiGs slipped behind him within seconds. "Kill," the controller announced. They reset and tried again. Same result. Again and again, at close range, the MiGs destroyed the Phantom. They climbed faster, turned tighter, and vanished before the American jet could respond. When they landed, Antonov sat in silence inside the cockpit. The truth was unavoidable. The Phantom dominated distance. The MiG dominated chaos. That evening, Antonov wrote a second report. This aircraft is built on the assumption of control. It assumes the enemy will be visible, predictable, and slow. Against such an enemy, it is invincible. Against a clever enemy, it becomes blind. He compared it to Soviet doctrine. Our aircraft are not elegant. They are not comfortable. They do not pretend to be intelligent. They exist to be abused, to be repaired in mud, to be flown by exhausted men on broken runways. They exist because war destroys everything that depends on perfection. The reports reached Moscow in early 1970. Designers at Mikoyan and Sukhoi read them closely. Some dismissed them as philosophical nonsense. Others quietly began simplifying future cockpits, reducing dependency on delicate systems, strengthening airframes, and prioritizing raw performance over technological luxury. The captured Phantom never flew again after 1970. Spare parts were too difficult to replace. Its systems required specialized American equipment. Eventually, it was cannibalized for study, then dismantled. Captain Daniel Reeve was returned to the United States in a prisoner exchange in 1973. He refused interviews. He refused promotions. When asked once why he left flying, he said only, "I saw my plane from the wrong side of history." Antonov continued testing Soviet aircraft into the late 1970s. When the MiG-29 entered service, he recognized the shift. It was still brutal, still physical, but smarter, more flexible, a soldier with a brain. In 1989, near the end of the Cold War, Antonov was asked in a closed military seminar what the Phantom had taught him. He answered slowly, "The Americans built a machine that assumed the world would behave. We built machines that assumed it would not. One approach creates miracles, the other creates survivors. In war, survivors shape the future." He never mentioned the Phantom again. But in the archives of two former enemies, two files remain. One about a MiG that frightened America, and one about a Phantom that frightened the Soviet Union. Not because it was weak, but because it was too perfect for an imperfect world.